Hi everybody, welcome to Inside Practice. Today we're speaking with Anne-Marie. She's a health and wellness coach at Goodbody Wellness and a key speaker at Legal Wellbeing in London on the 11th of September. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. So I'd love to start off with you telling our audience a little bit more about yourself and your experience, if you could.
Absolutely. So I've spent probably over 25 years now in the legal world, first as a corporate lawyer and then in director level business development roles and as a partner level recruiter in London and across Europe. So I've lived and breathed it all. And if I haven't lived and breathed it all, I've probably seen it all across that career. But I think a big moment for me was in 2009, after years of pushing through, I actually burnt out myself. I collapsed at work and was later diagnosed with myalgic encephalomyelitis, quite a mouthful, ME, or we call it chronic fatigue syndrome now. I spent over a year in bed. I was mostly paralysed and unable to feed myself, so it was quite severe. There's no magic cure, just a long, complex recovery journey. So that experience really changed everything about how I live, how I work, and really how I look after myself. But I recently retrained, as you mentioned, as a certified health and wellness coach, and I now help legal professionals build energy, resilience, and peak performance without burning out. So I know what it's like to be holding it all together on the outside whilst quietly falling apart in the inside, and I'm really passionate about this now.
Fantastic. That's quite a background, and obviously you've mentioned burnout, and your session is based around strategies on how to overcome that. I'd love to start off with asking you what trends are we seeing with resilience and burnout in the legal industry at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest thing that we're seeing is that burnout is no longer rare. It's widespread and it's really quite embedded in the culture of law. But I think, many are still suffering in silence. It's great that so many are coming forward and putting their hand up and are being open about their struggles. But I think there are still quite a lot suffering in silence. And obviously, we want to get to a point where burnout just isn't a thing at all. I think the stigma around mental health is slowly shifting. There's still a bit of a fear about being seen as weak and being able to sort of say, I'm not okay. But I definitely think we've just made such strides in that area, which is absolutely incredible. I think one slightly worrying trend that I'm sort of seeing anecdotally is more burnout happening earlier in legal careers. Associates and trainees are experiencing chronic stress and they're just too junior really to have the full toolkit or being able to sort of have the space to kind of recover. And I see that in business services teams as well. So that's definitely something that I'm seeing a shift towards. But on the positive side, firms are doing so much more about well-being. There's often a gap, though, between awareness and action. And whilst we've got loads of policies now in place, which is really, really great, I think in some places maybe the culture hasn't quite caught up. But that's definitely coming. I think the other trend that I'm seeing as well is that we're really redefining some of the terms that we probably grew up with. And I think in particular, terms like resilience, that was about, pushing through and, stiff upper lip kind of mentality. But really, we now talk about energy resilience and managing capacity, regulating stress, building in recovery and protecting what really fuels you. And I just don't think, talking about recovery as part of resilience was something we had in our lexicon, back in the day. So I think there's a lot of really positive things happening. But as I say, burnout is probably more prevalent than it was. And, we've got much work to do before we've really solved that puzzle.
Absolutely, and those are the two keywords, aren't they? Resilience and burnout.
Yeah.
Why would you say is it important for both firms and individuals to address resilience and burnout?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if we start with law firms, obviously law firms have a duty of care to look after their colleagues, their teams, their staff. And burnout isn't really just a well-being issue. It is a business risk for law firms, and law firms at the end of the day, they are businesses. Burnout, it affects client care, it affects client relationships, it hugely impacts talent retention and talent attraction. It can really impact strategic decision making, succession planning. So really every sort of touch point of running a business. And of course, there's a massive impact on productivity, utilization and profitability as well. So, there's a lot going on the business side of it. But absolutely, you asked about individuals as well. Chronic stress and burnout has serious long-term impact on people's health. And I think, that can really be divided down into sort of 4 key buckets, if you like. The obvious one is physical, and that can be from maybe sort of fairly minor digestive disorders, for example, or high risk of cancer, heart disease, diabetes. It's a very, very broad list in terms of physical impact. We've touched upon the mental impact, anxiety, stress, panic attacks, but it can also lead to depression, reliance on addiction, and even suicidal thoughts, and sadly sometimes worse. I think the third bucket is around career consequences. Sometimes poor decision making because they're struggling with burnout and fatigue can lead to mistakes, or people can sometimes just sort of get stagnated in their career. Sometimes there's a loss of job satisfaction. Sometimes what we see is that people are moving around from law firm to law firm, trying to sort of escape the problem, thinking it will be better somewhere else, and often it isn't. And I think sadly, we do see people exiting early from the profession, which is obviously something, we want to protect because it is a great profession. And then the fourth bucket, I guess, is the personal life impact, which really goes beyond what happens at work. You can see strained family relationships, challenging relationships with children. There's a risk of divorce there. There can be a lot of conflict at home, and if you've got a stressful day job, then life isn't much fun, is it? And I think sometimes people sort of get deeper into their career and they have that sort of sense of loss or sense of regret about those moments that they've missed whilst their children have grown up. So I think burnout affects literally every part of life, not just at work. And I think I think it's 90% of legal professionals are now saying that they've experienced some form of burnout in their career. This just isn't something that we can ignore. So a lot of impact on both the business and on individuals.
Absolutely. And obviously individuals are the focus there, and your session does revolve around burnout and the strategies people can use. What would you say individuals can do to future-proof themselves from burnout, obviously without giving too much away?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you need to come to the session because we're going to have such a good deep dive on this. But I think just to sort of summarize some of the key things, I think awareness, like so many things, is the first step. Don't wait for a collapse on the floor like I did, and just really sort of be mindful of those early signs of just feeling more tired, or not wanting to do very much at the weekend, struggle concentrating, brain fog, that kind of thing, or that Sunday dread that can sometimes kind of creep in at the weekend when you're sort of looking at the week ahead, and that sort of sense of overwhelm. But I think to sort of future-proof from burnout in the future, I think building in some sort of daily energy rituals can be really beneficial, and that can be anything from balancing your blood sugar and really looking at food and nutrition and not relying too heavily on caffeine and sugar to sort of power you through the day, staying hydrated, movement, really prioritizing quality sleep. Regulating your nervous system just for sort of a couple of minutes in between conference calls can really make a big difference to stress levels. So I think they're some of the big ones, but I know we're going to get into some nitty gritty on the day as well.
Definitely, it's going to be a fantastic session. Fantastic. So as a key speaker, to round up this interview then, what are you hoping attendees can get out of legal wellbeing?
Absolutely. So we're going to have a really lively and honest discussion about what is working in, legal wellbeing and where we still feel that we need to do more. We'll be raising awareness, but I'm hoping that we can sort of shift from just awareness into meaningful action. I'm really hoping that attendees on the day leave with this real sense of being seen and supported, and that it's okay to say you're not okay, and that burnout isn't failure. It's a system breakdown effectively. So yeah, lots of practical takeaways that people can implement that very day, hopefully. And really sort of making sure that people don't think that this is about adding more wellness and more things onto an already really sort of busy day that people have. It's just about doing things maybe a little bit more differently, because I think that energy is absolutely essential, and energy is really your edge in this profession, and protecting it just shouldn't be a luxury. It's got to be the law about protecting your energy. I think it's the foundation of your performance, your presence, and your peace, and we just can't work well if our body and our mind is not at peace.
Absolutely, it's going to be a great day.
Thanks so much.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today, and catch you next time.
Look forward to it. Thank you for having me.